The rain usually starts quietly, not dramatic, not cinematic, just a soft sound against the window while another exhausted man stares into the dark, wondering how his life became this heavy. At some point, without even noticing, he stopped feeling excited about the future. He still wakes up, still works, still pays bills, still answers messages, still carries responsibilities nobody sees. But deep inside, something has gone silent. And that is the dangerous part. Because most people think suffering looks dramatic. It doesn't. Most suffering looks like routine. It looks like a man scrolling his phone at 1:13 a.m. because he doesn't want to be alone with his own thoughts. It looks like saying, "I'm fine," for the 1000th time. It looks like watching years disappear while telling yourself you'll change soon. And maybe that's why discipline matters more than motivation ever will. Because motivation is emotional. Discipline is identity. Rohn once said, "Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment." Most people hear that sentence and think about productivity, schedules, morning routines, success, money. But that's not what this is really about. This is about the terrifying distance between the person you are and the person you could have become, and whether you have the strength to cross it. Because life has a strange way of slowly negotiating your standards downward. Not all at once. Never all at once. Just little compromises. You skip one workout, delay one dream, ignore one responsibility, accept one unhealthy habit, waste one evening, and then one day, you wake up inside a life you barely recognize. That's the frightening thing about wasted potential. It rarely feels dangerous in the moment. It feels comfortable. Comfort is seductive because it never announces itself as destruction. It arrives disguised as relief. Take it easy today. You deserve a break. You can start tomorrow. And sometimes that voice sounds compassionate. But if you listen carefully, it's often fear pretending to be comfort. Fear of failure. Fear of discomfort. Fear of discovering your limits. Fear of realizing how much work real transformation actually requires. Because discipline forces a confrontation most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The confrontation with themselves. Not the public version. Not the smiling version. Not the social media version. The real version. The one that knows exactly how many promises have been broken in silence. There's a psychological truth almost nobody talks about. Every time you fail to follow through on something important, your brain remembers. Not consciously, not loudly, but quietly. And over time, self-trust begins to erode. That's why undisciplined people often feel anxious even when nothing is technically wrong. Because deep down, they no longer believe themselves. They've heard too many empty promises from the person in the mirror. I'll change next month. I'll get serious soon. I'll stop wasting time. I'll become who I'm supposed to be. Eventually, the mind stops listening, and something painful happens. You begin doubting your own potential, not because you lack talent, but because your actions keep contradicting your ambitions. That contradiction creates emotional exhaustion, a quiet war between vision and behavior. And few things drain the soul more than becoming aware of your own self-betrayal, especially as you age. Because when you're young, time feels infinite. You believe there will always be another chance, another year, another opportunity. But somewhere in your 30s, 40s, 50s, the illusion changes. You start measuring life differently, not by years gained, but by years remaining. That realization hits hard at night, especially for men carrying invisible pressure. The pressure to provide, to stay strong, to suppress fear, to keep moving even when emotionally exhausted. Nobody really teaches men how to process silent disappointment. So many carry it quietly, in traffic, at work, at dinner tables, inside marriages, inside empty apartments, smiling externally, crushing internally. And often the deepest pain isn't failure. It's knowing you could have done more. That's what regret actually is. Not pain from trying and failing. Pain from abandoning yourself before the attempt. There's an old Stoic idea that becomes more terrifying as you grow older. The idea that every day you are becoming someone, not someday. Now, your habits are shaping a future personality in real time. Every repeated action casts a vote. Every excuse, every disciplined choice, every delay, every sacrifice. You are training a human being. And eventually, that trained identity becomes permanent. That's why discipline is not punishment. It's construction. You are building a self, brick by brick, morning by morning, choice by choice. Most people misunderstand discipline because they associate it with intensity. But real discipline is rarely dramatic. It's quiet, almost boring. And that's why it's so difficult. Because humans crave emotional stimulation. We want transformation to feel exciting, powerful, cinematic. But real transformation often feels repetitive. Wake up tired. Do the work anyway. Feel uncertain. Move anyway. Feel unmotivated. Continue anyway. That anyway is where identity changes. Not when emotions align. Not when inspiration appears. But when action survives emotion. That's the bridge Rohn was talking about. The bridge is built from repeated behaviors performed long after excitement disappears. And here's the hidden psychological truth most people never realize. Discipline creates freedom, not restriction. Freedom, because undisciplined people are not free. They are controlled by mood, impulse, fear, cravings, distraction, comfort. The man who cannot control his attention eventually loses control of his life. Look around. Entire industries profit from human distraction. Phones engineered to addict. Algorithms designed to hijack focus. Entertainment built to numb emotional discomfort. Modern life constantly whispers, escape yourself. And many do, for years. But escaping yourself has a hidden cost. You eventually become unfamiliar to yourself. That's why some people feel strangely empty even after achieving external success. Because accomplishment without alignment creates hollowness. Money cannot repair self-respect. Neither can status. You can lie to other people. But internally, you always know. You know whether you're avoiding your potential. You know whether fear is running your life. You know whether you're becoming stronger or weaker. And that awareness follows you into quiet rooms. Especially late at night. That's when the mind becomes brutally honest. Because silence removes distraction, and suddenly the questions appear. Who am I becoming? Why do I feel stuck? How many years have I wasted? Is it too late for me? That last question destroys many people emotionally, because they assume transformation belongs to the young. But wisdom often begins later. Sometimes suffering is what finally wakes a person up. The divorce, the burnout, the loneliness, the financial collapse, the health scare, the humiliation, the unbearable emptiness. Pain has a strange ability to clarify truth. It strips illusion. And sometimes the man who finally changes at 50 becomes mentally stronger than the man who never struggled at all. Because suffering can either harden bitterness or sharpen awareness. The difference is responsibility, not blame. Responsibility. That distinction matters. Blame focuses on the past. Responsibility focuses on power. And disciplined people understand something emotionally difficult. Nobody is coming to rescue them. Not motivation, not luck, not perfect timing, just repeated action, even when nobody applauds. Especially when nobody applauds. Because one of adulthood's harshest realities is that meaningful transformation is often invisible for a long time. You work. Nothing changes. You stay consistent. Still nothing. You improve quietly. Nobody notices. And this is where most people quit. Not because they're incapable, but because humans are emotionally impatient. We want visible evidence immediately. But nature itself doesn't work that way. Roots grow underground long before trees become visible. And human transformation follows the same law. At first, discipline feels unrewarding. Because the rewards are internal before they become external. You begin waking up with slightly more clarity, slightly more confidence, slightly less shame. Then slowly, self-respect returns. That changes everything. Because once a person regains self-respect, their entire posture toward life changes. They speak differently, think differently, walk differently, not from arrogance, from alignment. They no longer need endless external validation because internally, they trust themselves again. That trust is powerful and rare, especially in a world filled with people abandoning themselves daily. There's another uncomfortable truth nobody likes discussing. Discipline often creates loneliness because growth changes your relationship with comfort culture. You stop relating to certain conversations, certain habits, certain mentalities. You begin noticing how many people spend their lives avoiding depth, avoiding silence, avoiding reflection, avoiding responsibility. And sometimes growth means outgrowing environments that once felt normal. That hurts. Humans are tribal creatures. We want belonging. But there comes a point where staying emotionally asleep becomes more painful than standing alone. That's when real maturity begins. Not when life becomes easy, but when meaning becomes more important than comfort. Viktor Frankl once observed that humans can endure almost any suffering if they possess meaning. And maybe that's why disciplined people appear calmer during hardship. Not because life hurts them less, but because pain attached to purpose feels different than pain attached to emptiness. One builds, the other drains. Think about the exhausted father waking up before sunrise for work he hates, yet still trying to build a better future for his children. Think about the lonely woman rebuilding her life after betrayal. Think about the older man trying to repair decades of regret one disciplined day at a time. These stories rarely trend online, but this is where real courage exists. Quiet courage, not loud confidence, not performance, just humans refusing to surrender to meaninglessness. And maybe that is the deepest purpose of discipline, not achievement, self-respect, because accomplishment without self-respect feels empty. But even small victories earned honestly create peace. Making the bed, keeping a promise, finishing the workout, saving money consistently, sitting alone without escaping into distraction. These actions seem small, but psychologically, they are identity evidence. Proof that you are no longer controlled by every impulse. And every time you act with discipline, you send a message to yourself. I can rely on me. That sentence changes lives, because many people secretly feel abandoned by themselves. Years of inconsistency created internal distrust, and distrust creates anxiety. But disciplined action slowly repairs that fracture. Not overnight, slowly, like rebuilding a ruined bridge one piece at a time. That's why transformation often looks unimpressive externally at first. A person simply becomes steadier, more grounded, less reactive, less chaotic. They stop chasing constant stimulation. They become harder to emotionally manipulate because they no longer need immediate comfort. That's real strength, not aggression. Control, the ability to remain aligned even when emotions fluctuate. Ancient Stoics trained for this intentionally, not because they hated pleasure, but because they understood something modern culture forgets. A person addicted to comfort becomes fragile, and fragile people break when life inevitably becomes difficult, because difficulty is guaranteed. Aging, loss, illness, disappointment, rejection, death. No philosophy can remove these realities, but discipline changes how you meet them. It creates inner structure, and inner structure matters when external life becomes unstable. Without it, people collapse emotionally under pressure. With it, they bend without breaking. That resilience becomes incredibly valuable as life progresses, especially after 40, because by then, most people have discovered that life is not a straight line upward. Dreams fail, people leave, bodies change, energy shifts, parents age, regret accumulates. And yet, some individuals become wiser instead of bitter. Why? Because they stop expecting life to feel good all the time. They stop worshiping comfort. Instead, they begin valuing meaning, contribution, integrity, presence, discipline, not glamorous ideas, but stable ones. And stability becomes sacred in chaotic times. Maybe that's why older wisdom feels quieter. Youth often seeks excitement. Maturity seeks peace. Real peace, not temporary escape. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you are no longer running from yourself. That peace cannot be purchased. It must be earned internally, through difficult honesty, through consistency, through keeping promises nobody else sees. And perhaps that is the hidden tragedy of modern life. Many people spend years upgrading their lifestyle while neglecting their character. They build external success with internal emptiness, and eventually the soul notices. That's why some wealthy people still feel miserable, because external achievement cannot compensate for internal fragmentation. If discipline only produces money, it's incomplete. Real discipline produces wholeness. It aligns action with values. And alignment reduces suffering. Not external suffering, internal suffering. The exhausting feeling of becoming disconnected from yourself. There's a moment many people experience eventually. A quiet moment, usually alone, where they suddenly realize, if I continue living like this, nothing will change. That realization is painful, but also liberating. Because awareness creates possibility. You cannot transform what you refuse to confront. And confrontation requires courage. Not dramatic courage, daily courage. The courage to wake up and try again after disappointment. The courage to stay disciplined without recognition. The courage to improve slowly instead of fantasizing endlessly. That kind of courage reshapes identity over time. Not instantly, but permanently. And permanence matters more than intensity. Anyone can feel motivated temporarily. Very few can remain committed during emotionally dry seasons. But those seasons define people. Anyone can move when inspired. Can you move when tired, lonely, afraid, uncertain, heartbroken? That is where character is revealed. Not during comfort, during resistance. Because resistance exposes truth. It shows whether your goals are genuine or merely emotional fantasies. And maybe that's why disciplined individuals often appear calmer. They have already practiced suffering voluntarily. Cold mornings, hard choices, delayed gratification, consistency without applause. So when unavoidable suffering arrives, they are not completely destroyed by it. They've built psychological endurance. That endurance becomes a form of quiet confidence. Not loud ego, just stability. The understanding that emotions are temporary, but identity compounds. Day after day, year after year. Compounding works both ways. Small disciplines build powerful lives. Small neglects destroy them. That's the terrifying beauty of human existence. Tiny choices repeated long enough become destiny. And suddenly the quote sounds different. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Not because discipline guarantees perfection, but because without it, dreams remain imaginary. Potential remains trapped. Meaning remains distant. And life slowly becomes a collection of avoided possibilities. One of the saddest human experiences is reaching later years haunted by unlived capability. Not lacking talent, lacking follow-through. Knowing the person you could have become kept waiting for you, but you never arrived. That pain is difficult to describe, because it isn't physical. It's existential, a grief for abandoned selves. But here is the hopeful truth most people miss. As long as you are alive, identity is still being written. You are not required to become perfect overnight. You are required to stop abandoning yourself daily. That's where transformation truly begins. Not with intensity, with honesty, honest awareness, honest effort, honest discipline. And maybe tonight, while the city moves outside your window, while exhaustion sits quietly in your chest, while your mind replays old regrets, maybe this is the moment something shifts. Not dramatically, quietly. You decide to become someone you can respect again. Not for the world, for yourself. You begin understanding that discipline is not self-punishment. It is self-love in a mature form. Because real self-love is not indulgence. It's guidance, protection, standards, responsibility. It asks, what kind of life will my future self suffer for if I continue like this? That question changes people. Because eventually we realize, the future is not arriving someday. It is being built now. In ordinary moments, in invisible decisions, in small repeated actions nobody celebrates. That is how lives change. Quietly first, then permanently. And maybe years from now, you'll look back at this version of yourself, exhausted, uncertain, overwhelmed, and realize something extraordinary. This was the moment the bridge began to form. One disciplined choice at a time.